The following day, Frasier got up to leave early. He had received a report that there was a new development regarding Hugh. Dorothy hustled him out. She didn't want him to be there when Nick showed up. Nick pulled up to their house in a brand new luxury sports car at 8 o'clock. Dorothy met him in the driveway and greeted him effusively.
"Nick, it's so good to see you," she gushed. "It's been so long. I think you're taller and even more handsome than you used to be."
Houstus had followed her out. He grabbed Nick's hand and gave it a firm shake.
"It's good to see you two also," Nick replied. "I was a little rushed getting into town, so I hope you don't mind that I don't have time to pick up a real gift."
He handed an envelope to Houstus.
"This card has $10,000 in it. I hope that's okay."
Oh, we can't accept this," Dorothy said.
Flustered, but she took the envelope anyway.
"After all," she thought, "to refuse a gift is to refuse hospitality, and we wouldn't want to hurt his feelings."
Houstus nodded in agreement.
"It's not proper to give money as a gift," he thought. "But the family is short on cash right now. What can we say?" "Come in," he said. "Sit down and have a cup of coffee with us."
"Houstus, dear, I'm sure that Nick has better things to do than sit around with us old people," Dorothy admonished. "Go find Cyrus if you want to have a cup of coffee. We'll let the two young folks catch up together."
She turned toward the front door.
"I'll just go get Natalia. Nick, you would not believe how much San Clemente has changed since you've been away. Natalia can take you around and show you all the new developments."
She returned a few minutes later, leading Natalia. Nick's eyes lit up, and his heart began to beat faster as she entered the front door.
"I remember her being beautiful," he thought. "But she's turned from a fresh-faced girl into an elegant young woman."
He stared at her as he walked up to her, lost in his memories. Dorothy gave him a discreet nudge to bring him back to reality. He grabbed Natalia's hand and brought it to his lips.
"It's been too long, Natalia," he said smoothly. "And the years have only deepened your beauty."
"It has been a while,"
Natalia said noncommittally. Nick couldn't take his eyes off her.
"Both of you, go out and have a good time," Dorothy said.
She nudged Natalia toward the car's passenger side and then seemed to notice the car itself for the first time.
"Nick, is this yours?" she asked. "Or did you pick up a rental? This is pretty fancy."
"Oh, it's nothing," Nick said casually. "It's mine. I didn't want the hassle of dealing with a rental, so I decided to buy a car while I was in town. I happened to go past the dealership yesterday, so I picked this up. It was only $450,000. I got a good deal on it. If Natalia likes it, she can keep it."
Dorothy was so shocked that she almost forgot to breathe.
$450,000, she thought. And he picked it up on a whim? And he's willing to give it away for free? I thought he went abroad to study. I never thought he would be so successful.
Houstus echoed the sentiment.
"You seem to have done pretty well for yourself," he said. "What line of work are you in now?" "Oh, some entrepreneurial things," Nick replied. "I started a business with some friends overseas. I'm ashamed to say that we didn't quite reach our goal, though. Which was to make $100 million in profit within the first 5 years.
"How about that? Did you hear that, Natalia?" Dorothy asked. "Frasier keeps talking about starting a business, but Nick actually went and did it. And even if he didn't make $100 million, he's obviously successful."
"Dorothy, is Natalia planning to start a business also?" Nick asked. "I have some money I could invest in it if that's the case."
"Oh, no," Natalia replied. "I could never. We'll talk about this later, dear," Dorothy said. "Why don't you hop in the car and you can show Nick the sights?" This is such a beautiful car. You'll have to tell me if the ride is as smooth as it looks.
Natalia had no way to back out. She had already agreed to this. She slid into the passenger seat quietly. Across town at Frandotech, Frasier smiled when he heard Brett and Ryan's report. Malcolm had sent a message that Hugh entered a nightclub with only a few men with him for protection. And not just any nightclub. Still, Frasier said, we don't know whether this is just carelessness or whether he's baiting us.
Even if it's bait, we can't hold out any longer, Ryan said. That's Frankie's nightclub. He's given us a jar. It's time to catch this fly. I wish I could be in that nightclub right this second, he thought.
Ryan, you have to look at the big picture, Frasier said. You're in charge of the Heaven Breakers now. You can't be so impulsive.
I know, boss, Ryan replied. But it's just such a good opportunity.
Frasier turned to Brett. Any news on the financial front?
None yet, Brett replied.
They both knew that if Hugh was planning a big move, he would use his company's financial resources and shift assets around.
Last time, we had eyes on 30 different companies, and none of them showed any unusual activity.
Keep watching.
What about Hugh? Ryan asked. What if something happens to Frankie and Malcolm?
Frasier considered. Ryan, you stay here, he said. Work with Brett and make sure our men are ready to move in at a moment's notice. Frankie and Malcolm can handle themselves, but maybe I should pay a visit to the club. In the nightclub, all of the guests had been cleared out to allow a private discussion between Frankie and Hugh. Malcolm stood beside Hugh. His heart was beating fast.
We're in Frankie's territory now, he thought. I know he had planned an ambush. We could be attacked at any time. Frankie, Hugh said. All these years I've treated you well. I left you alone after the Three Eyes disbanded. I didn't need to do that, you know. And now I hear rumors that you're working against me. Hey, you wronged me, Frankie said, feigning hurt. I've done nothing but run my nightclub. I want to stay out of trouble from now on. And that's the problem, Hugh replied. Because I think you're in big trouble indeed. I know that you and Ryan's boss have reached an agreement, and that you're planning to ambush me.
Frankie trembled internally, but he kept his expression neutral.
Only my top lieutenants know that, he thought. Do I have a traitor? Hugh, you know me, he said. Even if I had 10 times the guts than I have now, I wouldn't dare move against you. Are you sure your information isn't wrong?
Hugh's expression turned cold.
I'm very sure. Do you happen to have someone named Danny Heinrichs who works for you? Why don't you ask him what he knows?
Frankie's heart sank. He knew a trap when he saw one.
Nothing gets by Hugh, he thought. Especially a story that's full of holes.
He called one of his men and told him to contact Danny. The man hurried off. Hugh and Frankie sipped their whiskey in awkward silence until he returned.
He can't reach Danny, he reported. He's in the wind.
Frankie felt cold as he looked at Hugh's victorious smirk.
What do you want?
He asked.
Simple, Hugh replied. Ryan and his boss are weak. What kind of future do you have with such useless trash bags? Pledge your loyalty to me. Be my eyes and ears when it comes to Ryan. To sweeten the deal, I'll wire you $1 million immediately. Look, even Malcolm let bygones be bygones and came back to work with me. There shouldn't be a choice you even have to think about.
Though his expression remained passive, Malcolm scoffed internally. Weak trash bags, he thought. Sophie and I found out the truth about Frasier. He was able to resist Princess Sophie's attempt at a hostile takeover, and he controls the Robster Corporation. He's one of the most powerful players in San Clemente. He's just waiting for the right time to make his move. Frankie didn't know what was going through Malcolm's head.
Your offer is tempting indeed, he said. And that's a lot of money. But I can't be a double agent. I'd rather just withdraw from the scene and stay neutral.
Malcolm felt his anger rising.
Doing nothing is as good as a betrayal, he thought. That's the coward's way out. How could Frankie be so weak? If I wasn't laying low myself, I'd beat him to a pulp. Well then, Hugh said, standing up. If that's your choice, I can't force you. Come on, Malcolm. It's time to go.
Still alert for an ambush, Malcolm surreptitiously passed Hugh a weapon. He was surprised when they were allowed to leave the nightclub, and he snorted in contempt at Frankie's weakness. Hugh and his men walked out of the nightclub, and no one stopped them. A few minutes later, Frasier's car rolled up in front of the club. He quickly opened the door and hurried inside. Frankie was sitting on the couch, head in his hands. He heard the door open and jumped to his feet.
Frasier?
He asked.
What are you doing here?
Where's Hugh? Frasier asked, looking around. This place is empty, he thought. Once again, I'm too late. Frankie told him everything that had happened, but he did not share that Hugh had tried to bribe him to keep quiet as an informant.
Frasier, you know what Hugh's like, he said. He's got spies everywhere. He even knew what you and I were planning. He knows more than I do, in fact. We have no chance against him. We should just leave him alone. I'm scared. I'll admit it, Frankie thought. I have the power and the resources to be the big boss of San Clemente. But after talking to Hugh, I realize it's all for nothing. Nothing can touch that man.
Frasier waved a hand dismissively. I expected nothing less. If Hugh didn't have those resources, then I seriously overestimated him. Frankie was amazed at Frasier's nonchalance.
What are you planning to do about him?
Hugh's proven that he can't hold back. It's time to take him on. Frasier was calm as he stared at the mural on the opposite wall.
Frasier, think this through carefully. Something felt off about Hugh's visit. He walked in and out of here like he owned the place. We can't ambush him here. I don't even know which of my men I can trust anymore. Do you?
Don't worry about it, Frasier smiled. Just be careful not to provoke him in the next little while. He looked around the room. There are a lot of decorations and little nooks here, he thought. This place just screams ambush. And if I can sense it, I know that Hugh can. He's been a crime boss for a long time. As for his informant. Frankie, you said that Hugh voluntarily told you who his mole was?
Danny Heinrichs, Frankie growled. And after I've treated that boy like family. He's been well rewarded in his time with us. Just thinking about it upsets me. I never thought he would betray me.
Frankie pounded his fist on the glass tabletop, shattering it. Frankie's men heard the commotion and rushed into the room. When they saw that only Frankie and Frasier were there, they turned to each other in confusion.
Weren't we going to deal with Hugh? One asked.
Where is he?
Frankie, what happened? Another asked. Where's Danny? Frankie demanded. Why isn't he here?
The men looked at each other.
Little Danny Heinrichs? One asked. Frankie, I haven't seen Danny all morning, one of the men said. But you know how he gets. He has a, casual relationship with time. I'm sure he just got delayed by something.
That's not an excuse, Frankie growled. He knew that today was a big day, and he knew better than to be late. Find him.
The men pulled out their phones and each one tried calling Danny. One by one, each man shook his head. No answer, they said. Frankie tore one of the couch cushions in frustration.
Ugh, how dare he betray me like this?
None of the men dared speak. They stood around the room, eyes lowered, hoping not to be the target of their boss's anger. But Frasier also saw confusion in their eyes. They did not know where Danny was, and they were astonished that he had double-crossed them. Frankie, Frasier said. Since Hugh revealed Danny's identity, we both know that he serves no further purpose. I'm afraid that Hugh might have...
Frankie!
One of the subordinates came running into the room. Danny's back! He just stumbled in! He stinks of alcohol, but it looks like someone gave him a beating. All of Frankie's men started talking at once.
Take me to him,
Frankie said grimly. His men followed along, more than one of them hoping that Frankie's accusations were false. Frasier trailed behind them. This is suspicious timing, he thought. If Danny really is a mole, he must have realized that Frankie will kill him. Why would he come back here? Soon, everyone had gathered in the main hall. Frankie stared at the drunk man slumped in front of him, an ugly expression on his face. His hands were clenched at his sides, and everybody heard the sound of his knuckles cracking.
How exactly did he get beaten up?
Frankie thought.
His clothes are in tatters, yes, but look at the love marks on his neck. He comes in here after a night of drunken debauchery and expects forgiveness?
Frankie's last traces of affection for Danny vanished like a flame blown out by the wind.
No one betrays me,
he said as he walked over, grabbed Danny by the collar, and lifted him up. Then he punched him directly in the face. A bruise bloomed immediately on Danny's cheek. He raised a hand to his face and stared at Frankie in disbelief.
Why did you hit me?
He asked plaintively.
You have the nerve to ask me that, he replied. After what you've done to me? Even if this is my best lieutenant, betrayal is a capital offense, he thought. What are you talking about?
Danny asked, bewildered.
I didn't do anything.
He dropped to his knees.
Please, whatever you think I've done, have mercy.
He knew that Frankie was not one for empty talk, and he did not let offenders off lightly. The other men spoke up in Danny's favor.
Hey, Frankie, this is little Danny we're talking about, one said. When he's with a woman at night, he has trouble getting up the next day.
He's no traitor. He was just stupid,
said another.
You know him. This must be a big misunderstanding.
Frasier watched quietly from the back of the room. This Frankie is entirely different than the one I met previously, he thought. What's going on here? Frankie looked at the disheveled man clutching at his pant leg in entreaty.
Once, I would have stood by him and believed him without hesitation, he thought. Things are different now.
You've all been fooled,
he called out to his men.
Hugh told me personally that Danny was his spy. Otherwise, how could he have known about our ambush?
The men looked at each other, stunned. Danny, a spy? More than one thought. Has he been tricking us for years? They all stepped away from Danny as though to dissociate themselves from him.
That's not true, Danny sobbed. I wasn't working for Hugh. I've never even met him.
Frasier continued to watch, but said nothing. He's not showing any signs of suspicion, he thought. If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. But maybe he's just a really good actor. At that moment, a piece of paper fell out of Danny's pocket and drifted to the floor. Everyone watched the paper flutter slowly to the floor. One of the men snatched it and handed it to Frankie. He spread it out, carefully unfolding the creases without tearing them. He stared at it for a long time, and the men watched his anger build, causing his skin to redden and the vein on his forehead to emerge.
"Danny," he said with cold fury, "you say you're not a traitor. Then how do you explain this check?"
With one hand, he crumpled the paper into a ball and threw it at Danny's face.
"A check? What check?"
Danny picked the paper up, unfolded it again, and gasped.
$1 million? Frankie, this isn't mine. I don't know where this came from. Look, I'll tell you the truth.
He took a deep breath and swallowed audibly.
Last night I went out back to answer the call of nature. Something hit me from behind and I passed out. When I woke up, I was in the hotel across the street. Go ask them. Ask for June. She works at the front desk there. When I left this morning, she asked if I had gotten enough rest. She can vouch for me. Ask her.
Danny was still on his knees. Frankie kicked his side hard, causing him to fall over.
"Jack," he called, "run across to the hotel. Talk to this June and see if his story checks out."
"Yes, sir."
Jack returned a few minutes later looking distinctly unsettled.
"Well,"
Frankie asked.
"did you find June?"
"Yes, she was there. She said..." He looked around the room without meeting anyone's eyes.
"She said that Danny checked in with a woman last night. A couple hours later, another man showed up and went up to his room. She said this man was in his late 40s, maybe early 50s.
Hey guys, Frasier here. Listen to the full episode of Unraveling the Son-in-Law exclusively on Pocket FM app. Click the link in description to install the app now.